how Microsoft uses a security tool to detect, manage, and remediate security triggers. Can you see my screen, the slide?
Yes.
Okay.
Please, can you put it
Uh,
on presentation?
okay. If
Thank
I
you.
put it on presentation mode, someone, in case anybody enters, you guys will have to admit. I won't be able to do that.
Oh, okay. All right.
Right
That'll
now.
be fine.
Okay. All right. Is this much better, please?
Still the
Is it?
same from my end, but we can go on.
Oh, okay. Okay, presentation mode. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so we'll be looking at Microsoft Security Operations, how Microsoft uses the security portal to run security operations, and what security operations, detections, and remediation, threat management, all of this. Microsoft has the security, the Microsoft operations portal, where it can be, the good thing is that it can be further plugged into Microsoft's SIEM solution, which is Microsoft Azure Sentinel, to allow you to do a more advanced extended detection response. However, with the Microsoft Defender family, you can carry out security operations in any environment that runs Microsoft solution. The good thing, before I go on, let me introduce myself. My name is Joy Ibamchimedon. I'm an IT professional over 10 years. I've been practicing technology the last 10, I think I'm hitting 11 years, and been doing from infrastructure, started from hands-on to coupling of laptops, coupling of CPUs, changing RAM and hard disks, formatting systems, and then I progressed into core infrastructure, virtualization, application virtualization, entered system solutioning and architecting, and then there was a gap in the organization I was working in at some point in time, and I began to fall in love with security, and then that's how I moved into security. I'm currently a security consultant, and I recently moved to Ireland, where I got a job with one of the top um, Microsoft partners in Ireland, where I'm doing security consulting for Microsoft solutions. So this is just to explain that I have a little, I call it a little background because there's continuous learning. Please hope I'm very audible. I have a loud voice, so I'm training myself on how to talk quiet or low. So hope I'm audible.
Perfect.
All right, thank you. Okay, so this was just to give a bit of background that I have little knowledge around Microsoft solutions, and one of the things I say to people is that because of the way the textiles community is, which is we're trying to get people into STEM, we're trying to also, for people who are already in STEM, kind of broaden their mindset. I'm going to put a disclaimer that this is not the full blown. If you would have to do the SC 200 Microsoft Security Operations Analyst training, you will be doing full deep dive. But what we've tried to do here is to bring up to speed, just like we did in the beginners class, give a broadened view about security and then how Microsoft is doing security. And so in in this cohort class is to also show security operations and how Microsoft uses these security platforms to help handle security operations. What how is this beneficial to you? If you already work in an organization that already uses Microsoft security, what this will do is will be an eye opener for you to begin to go back to say, oh, these things are already there, these features are here, so we're capable of doing these things. How can we enhance this? That's the value you take back out of this class. If you're new to the whole Microsoft environment, this will push you to begin to know that, oh, I want to start, so if security operations is where in STEM you want to be part of, this would help you begin to know that Microsoft has solutions that can do this and you can build a career here. So that's the essence or some of the value adds of being in this session. In this module one, we're going to look at mitigate threats using Microsoft 360 Defender, an overview and introduction, and we'll be introducing you to threat protection with Microsoft 365. So look at what security threats is, common threats, what are threats, We explain how the threat landscape is evolving and what are the things that must be protected. Um, Basic definitions. A lot of people have different ways that they have defined security threats. Wikipedia says that threat is a potential negative action. So, action is a keyword or event that is facilitated by a vulnerability that results in an unwanted impact to a computer system or application. I want us to pay attention to words like action. So, something must happen. Um, um, an event, and that action is going to trigger something else, and is always facilitated, meaning that these things threats don't just happen. Something aids a threat, something encourages a threat, or something creates a path for a threat to happen, and then at, after a threat has occurred, there will be a result that can impact something. So it's either going to impact the system or an application. That's how Wikipedia has defined security threats. RFC 4949 IETF
Sorry,
standards.
sorry,
Yes,
Joy.
please. Yeah.
Sorry. I don't know if it's my end, but you're still on the first slide and it's not some presentation. So I have a feeling that you've gone further to other slides.
Okay.
I don't know if
Who else is still not seeing
Yeah,
the
same,
second
same
slide?
here. Oh, it's just the
Oh,
first slide showing
Yeah, I can only see the first slide.
something is
with your
wrong.
name on it.
Is this better?
Okay, yeah.
Is this better? Can you see another slide now?
Yes.
I'm going to go back again. Can you see another slide now?
Yes, I
Yes.
can.
Okay,
I
so it's
can see the
working now.
slide.
Okay,
Okay.
all right. Okay, all right. I'm going to go back a bit. After I had introduced myself, to say that today we'll be looking at just module one, which is an overview on how to mitigate threats using Microsoft 365 Defender. Like I said at the beginners class, we looked at security, operations, compliance, governance, and then the context of security, why security is important, and then we looked at Microsoft's own way of doing security. And now in this place, we want to look at security operations. And like I said, if you wanted to do full blown Microsoft security operations, training, you will need to, leverage on a lot of Microsoft training materials that are available online. What we're achieving with this cohort is to give you an overview and kind of help you understand where Microsoft is playing into and some of the capabilities. So, like I said, it's not a full blown SC200 training. For this class today, we'll be looking at four core objectives. We look at what security threats are so that we can understand this thing. What are the common threats? And then how this threat landscape is evolving, and then the things that must be protected. And then we'll go hands on into the Microsoft 365 platform. Um, Security threats. Please confirm, can we see the security threat slide?
Yes.
Okay, so we're good now. Right. So I said that there are different definitions of security threats. Wikipedia defines security threats as a potential negative action. So it's negative, an action, or an event, meaning that something would happen. A threat is something that happens or something that will happen or a series of things that happen, facilitated by a vulnerability, meaning that a threat is always triggered by something, and in this definition by Wikipedia, it says that it's facilitated by a vulnerability that results in, meaning that it's when a threat is triggered, something will happen and it's triggered by something, and then there's always a response, a reaction. And in this definition, Wikipedia says that will result in an unwanted impact. So the result of a threat is not what you expected, it's not what you had planned. It triggers something unwanted to either a computer system or an application. take note of those keywords, because when we'll be looking at simulations of threats or looking at incidents and alerts of threats, you would see how this definition plays out there, how there's been a negative action, where there's been an event, and where a vulnerability has been exploited, and then the result is an impact to a system or a computer. RFC 4949 IFTS, I think, is a standard. They define threat as a potential for violation. So in this instance, it's a potential. For them, it's not yet happened. It's a potential for violation. So a threat has the ability to violate your security, and it exists where there's an entity. So it means that a threat cannot just happen in the blues. A threat will happen on something, where there's a circumstance, where there's a capability, where there's an action or event that can cause harm. And if you look at these two definitions, you can begin to pick out similarity of words. There's an action or event. So a threat will always trigger an action or event, right? And it will work on an entity. So in the Wikipedia definition, it said the impact to a computer system or application. We can choose to classify those things as entities. And you agree with me? And then a violation of your security. If you look at the Wikipedia definition where it says that it's facilitated by a vulnerability, right? Something is violating something. All right, so if we go to NIST definition, it says the threat is an event or a condition that has the potential for causing asset loss. If you compare this also to Wikipedia, you will see where it says it has an impact, you know. And then if you look at the RFC definition, it says that could cause harm. And here saying it has potential to cause asset loss, meaning that a threat, once a threat has happened or a threat has potential to happen, the impact or the result of the threat is a loss. Okay, and the undesirable consequences or impact for such loss. Now remember, information security stands at confidentiality, integrity, and accountability. So it means that if you look at this definition, it means that a threat is going to definitely not allow us to perform information security in any environment, which is why they're called threats to security. It's very important that we understand how to detect these threats, how to find them, how to mitigate them, how to prevent them, and how to ensure that our security postures are able to handle these threats. Any questions so far for me? Okay, so let's go. So we have loads and loads of threats. However, we were able to I just picked up key common threats, that exist today or that we're familiar with. I'm sure a lot of us we've heard the word ransomware, 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 ransomware. Yeah, and ransomware is a type of threat, that once it's successfully executed on your system, encrypts your hard drives and takes over your data, right? So if we want to place this side by side with the definition, you would see that a ransomware is really a threat. It has a negative impact. Once a ransomware has infected your system and encrypted, there's a negative impact. And it's the ransomware is actually exploiting a vulnerability that exists, and it's giving an unwanted impact, which is the attacker begins to ask you to pay ransom. So most times you don't have access to your hard drive. So if you look at NIST definition, you're already having asset loss. Consequences of impact for those kind of loss is causing harm. They're demanding ransom from you. So ransomware is one of the threats that we're seeing today. We also have your typical malware, what you call your viruses and all of that. We can see that when they infect the systems, they either cause the systems not to be usable, they corrupt files. And so if you look at these different examples of common threats that we have put here, they have they 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 explain or they justify the definition that we have seen for security threats. Okay, so the most common one, we have phishing. When it comes to email, you have phishing emails. These are common threats that we see that once they come in, the impact that they have on the system, the impact that they have on the entities leads to loss. Now, What are the things that have to be protected from threats? If you look at that definition again, we have to look at entities. It means that threats didn't just happen, threats impact entities, assets. So your endpoint, your email, your apps, your identity, your secrets, these are key entities that need to be protected from threats, right? Threats would not just stay and happen. A threat would happen through an entity. And so we decided, Microsoft has decided to call out these five entities. There are so many other ways that the threat can, but these five entities become the categorization. So your laptop, your servers, your mobile device will all fall into endpoint, right? Your email would fall into email. Your apps, when we call apps, any kind of app, your SaaS apps, whether they are mobile apps, whether they are web apps, your applications will fall under apps. Your identity, which is how you're logging in, whatever is used to identify who you are, and in some instances, endpoints can be identity, emails can be identity, but whatever is used to identify you, it's something that needs to be protected. And then your secrets, which we call your password tokens, your key, your private keys, and encryption keys. These are all ways that you use to. These are all different entities that we have categorized as the five, core entities that have to be protected from threats. Okay, and if we take it down to the Microsoft our beginners class, where we began to explain, Microsoft has put in what we call the Microsoft 365 Defender services. What Microsoft has done is that if you look at these five core entities, Microsoft has gone ahead to create or Defender service engine, as I choose to call it, which is like is an integrated threat protection suite, which helps you cover these five core entities so that you can detect malicious activity across these endpoints. And then you can provide a complete attack chain compromise story that will help you to understand threats, help you to remediate them, help you to prevent your organization from future attacks. So the Microsoft 365 Defender services has the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. The Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, back in the days, people would call it your typical antivirus. But today, the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint is not just an antivirus, because the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint does beyond antivirus. The Microsoft Defender for Endpoint will do your what we call the next generation antivirus. It will do your attack surface reduction. It will do your threat and vulnerability management. It would have also your um, device management and a whole lot of functionality. So the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint is no more your typical antivirus that you would call it. It also has the EDR, the endpoint detection response. And then Microsoft now has what we call the Defender Vulnerability Management. Now, remember, if you remember the Wikipedia that says it will exploit a vulnerability, and then we're saying that the five core, entities that need to be protected, right? It means that vulnerabilities on these endpoints need to be properly managed. So Microsoft has brought out the Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management that can enable you on these entities see their vulnerability state, determine their secure posture, and then how to remediate them. Microsoft has also introduced the Microsoft Defender for Office 365. This is the Defender service that ties into the email entity. Microsoft has understood that. Remember, we have one of the common threats as phishing, and one of the ways that phishing is done is through emails. And so Microsoft has built a security service called the Microsoft Defender for Office 365 that sits at the email entity and helps you to secure. This is beyond your typical email gateway security. Okay, Microsoft has broadened the capability of this solution that it sits at that layer and helps you to provide, intelligent threat protection email um, at your email layer or email infrastructure. Another Defender service that Microsoft has put in is the Microsoft Defender for Identity. I want you to, as we look at this, play side by side how this ties into those five key you know, entities that we said that needs to be protected. So the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint will be looking at the endpoint. The Microsoft Defender for Office will be looking at the email. The Microsoft Defender for Identity will be looking at your identity. And when we say identity here, you know, the typical username and password. How do you authenticate? You know, what are you using to authenticate? You know, is it your Microsoft Active Directory on prem? Is it Microsoft Active Directory, Azure Active Directory on the cloud? You know, Microsoft has put in a defender for identity that allows them, you can extend even your on-prem Active Directory into this cloud service, and then it can help you secure. Think about it. Where your users logging in, you want to know how your user is logging in. You want to know where they're logging in from. You don't want to know what type of device they're using to log in. If you want to have an integrated threat protection, you want to know, because the first form of access is through identity. If a device is compromised or if an entity is compromised, one of the things that the attacker wants to harvest or do is get reconnaissance information about, you know, about that environment or that organization. And one of the ways is by harvesting identities that have privileged access. So your defender for identity has an intelligent way to protect these things. So for instance, if Joy logged in from Ireland today, and in 2 minutes Joy is seen from logging in from Nigeria, that's a threat alert. There's no way that I'll be logging in from two different locations that are at least 6 hours apart each other, even if you're using a private jet to go out within the same time. Are you getting it? So it means that you want something that can help you be able to see those kind of triggers, because if your account has been compromised, you wouldn't know. Your account will be used by something else. So Microsoft has built a solution that can be able to throw such level of intelligence. So this is no more a case of when the person has entered and is installing the MCAT or is doing this. No, while we have Defender for Endpoint to help us detect that, Microsoft is also saying that even before the endpoint, we want to be able to see when from the identity level, because it could be that it was the identity that was first compromised before the person would gain access into an endpoint. So we want to be able to play those kind of intelligence. We want to even be able to now extend it to say if a system is not compliant to XYZ, deny login. And so your identity can help you expand those functionalities using conditional access policies that Microsoft has. Um, and then we have the Microsoft Defender for cloud apps. This helps us to manage apps. You know, you can extend. Today, all your IT shadow users, do you know what your users are doing? We're in a world now of BYOD, bring your own device, or a world of work from home. You know, where what are people doing from? People are, because they're working from home, they are gaining lots and lots of they're getting lots and they're needing lots and lots of what, relaxation on company policies so that they can be able to do certain things. At the end of the excuse me, at the end of the day, the network defense layer that organizations have built around their infrastructure. We used to be in a world where you come to the office to work. So you are in your office. So the firewall is there, the DMZ is protected, is this. So those whole network defense layer have been built around people's organizations and infrastructure. We're now in a world of work from home, work from anywhere, because the pandemic has shown us that business will have to continue. This is no more a function of whether you like it or not. You need, as an organization right now, to begin to think that I need to give certain type of users access to be able to work from anywhere. And so how do I take this same level of security that I have built around my infrastructure and extend it to these people to ensure that, you know, I can secure my organization even when people are working remotely. So one of the things, you want to know the kind of apps people are using. You want to know, because if people are using apps and using your identity to connect to these apps, you want to be able to know so that you can know how to track, how to prevent when these apps are vulnerable, when these apps have been declared as having vulnerabilities. You want to be able to plug all of this together, right? And then we have the other things that are subset of this. So we have the Defender for IoT, we have the Defender for Defender for IoT, Defender for so many other things on Azure, you know. But you know, from and that's when we begin to extend into Microsoft Sentinel. But for this intermediate class, we're just going to be looking at the Microsoft 365 Defender services. This 5 Defender services that cover the 5 core entities that we have said that when threat needs to happen, these are some of the core entities that are susceptible to these threats. And so, in order for us to provide a complete attack chain, story that ensures that these threats are detected, remediated, and protected, we'll be looking at how Microsoft brings these five Defender services to help us also provide and protect the five entities. Any questions so far? Are we good? Class is too quiet.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, we're fine.
Well,
Are
we're,
we
we're,
making
we're,
Yeah.
are
we're
we
following.
making sense? Are we making sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I can't see the teams. Can someone confirm that we're still recording?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Yes, it's still recording.
All right. So let's pump this up a bit to get you a bit excited. You know. For those of you in the class, which of you currently work in a department that uses or in an organization that uses Microsoft Office 365? Does any of you work in any organization that uses Microsoft 365? Or is any of you currently working in IT department or in your SOC department or in your compliance and control department? Or you are all totally new to security, like you are in non technology related roles?
I work in an IT department. But okay, well, we use Office 365. Yeah.
Okay,
Um,
that's good.
yeah.
Is this Chisom talking?
Sorry. No,
Is this
this is
Chisom?
Cheska,
Oh,
Francesca.
okay, Francesca, you're welcome. I think you joined. All right, so good. You can mute yourself now. Yeah. Interesting thing is the fact that your organization is using Office 365, you already have access to this. Yes, there are license requirements, but the good thing I say to people is if you're already using Office 365 and your organization is already using Windows 10, you are 60 to 70% saving your organization money if they come on board the Microsoft 365 Defender. I'm not selling any product here, but I'm just telling you for facts. You have saved your organization 60 to 70% cost on enhancing their security posture because by default, every Windows 10 already has the Microsoft Defender sensors. So you're not pushing any agents, it's inbuilt into Windows 10 upwards. So imagine every time a solution was bought and your organization had to worry about compliance because they had to push agents. All of those energy and stress is gone off once you're on board into the Defender services. If you're using Microsoft Office 365, they already can leverage on identity because they have an Azure identity and they're already using Office email, so they can begin to look into the Office Microsoft Defender for Office. And then already because you have the Azure, you can begin to look at the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. There are ways to now speak into all the licensing implication. How does this save us cost? But one thing is you're already 60% compliant to this thing from a asset. And so when we say endpoint identity, you're already covered. All you just need to do is now say, oh, what's the licensing cost? And then you look at numbers. But from a security posture, your organization is already covered. Those sensors can begin to feed back in once the necessary onboarding steps have been done. So what I say to people when I meet them, I say, if I'm in that organization, it's a fast sell or it's a fast value add to an organization that is struggling or trying to understand how they can stay safe and they can stay secure. They can leverage on this Microsoft, security platforms that are already there because they're already using the Microsoft solution. So they're not going to buy anything new. It's just by click button XYZ configuration that can happen in split seconds. And these sensors that are already existing begin to know that, oh, now I can send this telemetry because the sensors already exist on your devices. These sensors are already capturing this event because you're already using Azure AD. If you're hands-on, I will tell you log into your Azure AD now. You begin to see events there, but there's no place you're pushing these events to so that you can look at, which is what we're looking at today, the security operations. So once you have where the sensors know that this is where I want to correlate my information, that's all. So I tell people it's a quick kill for me. So we're going to understand extended detection and response signals, how they defend, how each of them, how each of these entities um, defend across attack chains. Okay. You and I know that, a typical attack timeline would be that an attacker would ask himself, why do I want to, please, I want to look for my note. An attacker will ask himself prior to the attack, the question will be, what is the purpose of my attack? An attacker will ask themselves, oh, what's the purpose of my attack? Or maybe I want to be able to move money, I want to be able to initiate money, or I want to be able to take data. And so they will now have to say, oh, we want to do some form of reconnaissance, right? And then they will now either initiate some form of denial of service. So a typical attack timeline, you either see the research and preparation, where they are doing research on you, they're preparing themselves, and then once they're able to come in, it takes them between 24 to 48 hours to come into your environment, do some bit of domain admin compromise, and then they span there for a couple of months where they are undetected and begin to explorate, data. So we're going to see how, the whole defender services, when plugged into, can help us to um, have insider and have visibility to the insider and external threats. Like I had mentioned, all of these 5 defender services share their signals out, and what they do is that they give us combined incident queue, they give us automated responses, that help us to stop this attack. They do a bit of threat analytics. You will see where the cross products can be used for trend hunting, and where even you can self-heal compromised devices and identities and mailboxes. So in this typical story, if you look at here at the left, you have the defender for Office 365. And here we're showing that a phishing mail has been sent. And when this phishing email was sent, it was sent with an attachment, right? And then this attachment, through a click, once the attachment was opened, there's a click, and then it goes back to a website. Now, this click, remember, this attachment lands um, on the device, okay? And so when it lands on the device, um, this is a scenario where it's not yet detected. I'm just trying to play out where it's not detected before I explain to you how each of the defender services begins to pick it up. Once it lands on a device, if there's no detection, right, it initiates installation and then tries to go back to the command and control. Goes back to the command and control. Your identity has already been compromised, and then your identity is now used to come back into the environment, because now your user account is compromised. They come back to the environment, and then because they're with your identity and they're logged into your environment, they begin to gather information different ways. Either they gather information from your email, because now they can see, oh, you're actually the CFO, you are the PA to the CFO. Oh, there's this client. They begin to gather reconnaissance, collect data, and then they begin to move around. And then most of the data that they are collecting, they begin to send it out. Okay. And then as they begin to send this data out, right, that's how a typical threat flow happens in an environment. From just a simple email that somebody got, open the attachment, command and control process is installed on the endpoint, and then that endpoint, releases the password hashes out, and then they can now come back and log in, through another means into that organization, and begin to do reconnaissance and begin to take. And then beyond that, they begin to even move bilaterally. What you begin to see them is they can now hop, depending on whose account that they have compromised, because most time, because they are internal, they can now go across the network. And as they are going across the network, they're harvesting more information. And as they are gathering this information, they are moving it out of your organization, exporting invoices, exporting email addresses, exporting processes, exporting the ways your business is doing operation, and then they can go and now decide how they want to hit that organization. This is just a typical way of our. So how does the Microsoft Defender services help us defend ourselves across these attack chains? When you have your Defender for Office 365 sitting here, once that email comes with the attachment, it's able to pick up those those threats, able to pick up those attachments, and then it moves across to the Defender for Endpoint, which is already on your system. So if for any reason there's a miss out of that attachment at the Defender for Office, when it comes to Defender for Endpoint, on the endpoint side, is able to pick up this exploitation and installation and command and control communication, and then it moves also to the identity. So it's able to see that this identity, like I gave you an example, why is Joy logging in Ireland and at the same time she's logging in Nigeria in 2 seconds? How is that possible? It's not possible. So it picks up that this account is being compromised by flagging it as a risky sign or risky user attack, and then helps prevent that communication. It begins to see that why is Joy trying to move from system to system? What is this account doing? These are all the things that happen in an organization that you don't see. So as a security operations person, what these are the things that call out for you when you begin to see endpoints trying to talk to external IPs. You want to know what are these IPs? Why is this device always trying to talk out? When you begin to see lots of emails coming with attachments, that are worrisome, you want to begin to say, why are we getting loads of this kind of inflow of emails, with this attachment? When you begin to see user devices logging in at randomly from different locations, and different IPs, you want to understand why. When you begin to see accounts very much interested in picking data and sending out this data, either through OneDrive, either through Google Drive, either through any other form of storage services, you want to wonder. Now, the only way you can gain visibility into these things is if you have proper, extended detection and response solutions that can tell you these signals, because every day on your system, signals are happening. You power on your system is sending out signals to where? So the sensor on your Windows 10 or Windows 11 or your Windows servers already have these sensors, and they help you begin to send out these signals. So when you configure them right, they can send these signals to the Defender 365 services, and it can pick up this behavior. And then what Microsoft has done is, because of the cloud infrastructure, so we have the Azure virtual machines, and the Microsoft has placed the Microsoft Sentinel, where all these entities can feed into the Microsoft Sentinel, and then you can have uh, like a log correlator. So the Microsoft Sentinel is like a log correlator that can now help you show you things, history of violations, things that happened, and then you can now begin to do deep dive trend hunting to large data. So you can do overtime. Oh, we've noticed that every time so imagine as an e-commerce organization that does Black Friday and this, you can now look at, we notice that every time we do Black Friday, we get this kind of things because we have seen it over time. Every November, this is what happens every November. So you can now begin to make intelligent security decisions that can help protect the environment. You can say, the last time we had a potential hit, it was during public holiday. Now again, during public, there's something about public holiday. These are the ways a security operator works. Your brain begins to think and say, because of the correlation of all this information that you have, you can now say, okay, if it's everything, let's go and check. What are the systems that work during holiday? What are the systems that are up during holiday? What are the identities that are up? And then you begin to find that they're matching connectors between all these chains. You can be able to link everything together. And that's what the Microsoft 365 family is bringing to you. Because they're saying that if you have your identity with us, if you have your device with us, if you have your email with us, we can correlate all these things together and help you gain an extended detection and response from all these signals. Any question, please? Okay, so let's look at a typical compromised endpoint, right? A device can be infected either by personal email, USB, and other vectors, right? Now, in this scenario, we want to rapidly detect and clean all the managed devices, the email, and other resources across the environment and resources. So a user called Paul is sitting probably at home, and on his work laptop, he opens his personal email. Because there's nothing wrong there. He opens a browser, goes to his personal email, and then he opens it. However, his personal email has been targeted with a phishing email, right? That has this thing. Now, this is not his office email. This is his personal email, right? And so, what does he do? He clicks on that email, and there's a malicious payload that is there. So, because he's using the company laptop that has Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, this payload is detected. Okay, the payload is detected and automatically remediated. However, the when it's remediated, this detection is shared with the Microsoft Threat Intelligence that, oh, see the kind of thing we've seen on their devices. And then what it does is that it takes that email, takes that attachment, and with Microsoft Defender for Office, does a scan across the company-wide email address to see if we've gotten that kind of thing on any of the corporate emails. And when it detects it, it begins to block those attachments from future attacks and remove it from anywhere that it is. So it now, depending on how, as a security operator, you want to respond, in some instances, your action will be to automatically disable that user from that device, because that device that was detected and remediated has been flagged, right? And so it will disable that user from that device, and then that user can log in, but it's isolated from anything that is the organization. So you will not be able to send email to anybody. You will not be able to communicate to anybody on the network, even though you are on your private, even if you're on your private network, you're not able to do anything that has to associate with the organization. And then that gives time for that telemetry to be sent to the Microsoft Threat Intelligence. And then Microsoft Threat Intelligence puts it together, sends it to the Defender for Office to say, scan the whole company email and remove anywhere you see such attachment from anybody's mailbox, and then use this now as a metrics for future detections. So anytime we see any matching attachment to this kind of attachment, we automatically block it. These are some of the ways that you can operate as a security operator using the Microsoft Defender services. Now, once the malware has been detected and the user has been isolated, what happens is that the system is now cleaned, is now fine-tuned. Now, the good thing about the Microsoft 365 is that the integration with even the endpoint security management of it automatically flags that device as non-compliant, and so that device was already isolated. Once that device has been cleaned and remediated, the sensor turns that device up because the device status is now changed to remediated, and then the endpoint detection, which is in tune, and the Azure Active Directory now communicate back to the app, the Office 365 and the apps, and then this user that was temporarily suspended is now, access is now restored. All of this you can do from the operation or security Microsoft portal as a security operator. So you can imagine that your work as a security person becomes much easier just because you have the right interface and the right platform to work with. Okay. Any question I would like to, if not, I would like to see this whole thing that we're talking about. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So for the lady who said that they use the Microsoft 365 already in the organization, it means that, I don't know, if you're in IT and you're in security, then you should just ask to be given security administrator role on the Azure Active Directory, and you should be able to go to security.microsoft.com. The truth is, everybody can go to security.microsoft.com, but if you are not an admin, you will not see everything that I'm seeing. But once you have an Office 365 access, you can see this for your organization, but you only see what is applicable to you. So in this instance, you would come to the incidents and alert, and that's where this is where it shows your organization status. So your secure score says that a high secure score, you know, means that you have lower identified risk, right? And a low secure score means that you have high, identified risk. But we will see the difference in the threat and vulnerability management. In threat and vulnerability management, once your score is high, then you have high exposure as against secure score. So in secure score, we need low score, sorry, we need high score to show that you have your organization posture is good. So this is a very low score based on the devices that are in this organization that I'm using the lab. And so there are lots of work that needs to be done. So if you go to incident, yeah, so if you go to incident, you will see that there's one incident here in this organization. Okay, and your incident will show you, incident you can see just by looking at the name, it tells you this is a multi-stage incident that involves initial access and discovery on one of the endpoints. It can automatically show you, you can see impacted assets that have been affected by this or that have this trigger on. And once you expand it, you can see everything. You can see all the, so we call it a multi-stage, meaning that so many things happened by just one trigger on this device, and then you can see all the things that try to happen. And if you um, come to alert, you can see the different triggers. Now you can see the detection source, meaning that it was the EDR that detected this trigger. If you click one of the alerts, it will give you a breakdown of what actually happened on this device. So you can see here at what time this happened, um, what was trying to happen, right? It was a PowerShell script, um, suspicious processing. It actually resolved it, but it's telling you that this is what happened. You can see um, it gives you a detailed, runtime breakdown of what actually happened. So this was executed as a PowerShell script on this device, and the EDR detected it and the time it happened. And as a security operator, this can allow you be able to make intelligent decisions around what has happened. It can even give you. Now the good thing is you can see, so in this instance it was just only on one device. If this threat has already extended across different devices in the organization, it will list all the devices here for you, and you will see how much has. If you wanted to now go further, we could from here we could now decide to take actions. Do we want to run an antivirus scan? Do we want to isolate this device? Unfortunately, the device is this one I'm using to display. That's why once I click this, you'll be able to see that we will lose connection, and then if we click it again, we'll be able to connect back. But I can't do that because it means I don't have connection. You can restrict app execution. You can say, okay, I want to just even restrict anything from being able to execute themselves on this device. Okay. um you can open the device itself to gain more visibility inside it, to see even on this device itself, what's happening on this device. We have here different alerts, because it could be that it's even beyond here. So it begins to show you all that has happened on this device. Initially, it was a particular alert that we were seeing. Now we are seeing every type of activity that has happened on this device. Um, and if you go to device configuration, you begin to see um, configurations that exist on this device that are okay, and then you see security recommendation for that device. We'll come to another place where you see the value of all the security recommendation. security recommendation shows you um, this device that has had this. So you can decide that if this device has already had this compromising thing, after isolating it, you can now come here as a security operator to review this device. And you can begin to see that, oh, this device that was even, flagged with this malware has so many, issues around it. So your security recommendations actually tie into your secure score. And I can see that there's Apache here that is even susceptible to log4j. When we go to threat and vulnerability management, you will see the importance of this. But as an operator, you can take a device that has already been flagged and now do further security checks on that device that can show you, how this device itself, you know, is a security, is a security threat to your organization. If you click on software inventory, it will tell you all the softwares that are on that device. And you can already from here begin to see that this device is, vulnerable to log4j, and then from here you can also see discovered vulnerabilities. When you go further to tvn, you can see all the vulnerabilities that have been highlighted. However, remember, where we started from was threat and alerts, right? That showed us, a payload that was executed on this device, and we isolated device, even though we didn't physically do it, but an assumption is that we isolated this, and now we're doing investigation, and we're seeing that this device itself is, a big problem to the organization, and there are lots of things that need to be remediated on this device. Any questions so far?
Yes, thank you very much, Joy. May I ask a
Mhm.
question?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So, is it possible to set like an alert where you say if the risk is above low, a particular threshold, that it should auto um, disable that device? I'm saying this because what if the attacker is from like a country that is 8 hours or 6 hours
Mhm.
difference, and maybe the security person is probably sleeping at that moment, so you can avoid more danger before you get up at 5 a.m. or before you get to the office. So, is it possible to set that trigger so that if it's above a particular threshold, you can just disable that system entirely from the
Yes,
network before you
yes,
can? All right, good.
yes. I can show us tomorrow. I know it's somewhere here. There's a place to set what your. It's called auto remediation. You can set the kind of alerts that you want it to take automatic actions on, and then you can set the kind of alerts that you want it to. Because every alert it will put in the alert portal, but then you can set that this kind of alerts you want it to remediate, and then setting alert. So for this one, if you expand, you will see that it actually resolved some of the, or if not all, hold on. Mm, there's a place that will show that remediated. Yeah. So if you look at here, where it started to say suspicious activities, right? New. It was explaining what was happening, and then it came here to say resolve. Do something. I don't know if it's something. Thing disappears. It feels that it resolves it, and so it's just showing us the alert for investigation. Yeah. Yeah. Can you see? So it's actually remediated it, but it's alerting it. So this kind of trigger was configured for auto remediation, and so it has remediated it, but it was just informing. So as a security operator, if you come here, you know, and you see that okay, there was an alert, it has remediated, you still want to do your investigation just to be sure how did this happen? How did it get in? How far has this, spread? So when you click on investigation, it would give you a breakdown so you can see how it came in from this device. The alert was received, the PowerShell dropped a, you can see it, that the PowerShell, so this was executed with PowerShell, and it dropped the suspicious file on the machine. Now remember that this has already been remediated, right? Now as a security operator, when you are reviewing this alert, one of the things you want to do is you want to also look for ways to be proactive, right? Now we are seeing PowerShell. We can begin to ask ourselves, is this user an administrator? Should a typical user be able to have execution rights on PowerShell? You and I know that you can restrict your PowerShell to restricted mode, and there are different modes on PowerShell. So this can help an organization to even begin to know how to configure certain things or certain policies. But this now tells us how this alert was able to perform on these devices, how long it took. It took about 51 minutes to complete, and then when the PowerShell dropped here, it came in on the device, and then it began to, you know, it began to infect these different processes. So you can see files, processes, services that were all involved in this. That were all involved in this conversation, even IP addresses. From here, you can see the IP addresses that were involved in the conversation, and then the action that happened, it has remediated it, right? So yes, you can create automatic, yes, you can create automated response, and then you can come back as a security operator to review what has happened. And so these are IP addresses that you can now export, and I'll be showing us also where you can go based on these IP addresses, because what happens is that it's trying to talk. These are the command and control IP addresses. You can now take these IP addresses and automatically go and block them in your indicators, because they are now known as bad vectors. So in summary for here, from incidents, you will see incidents that are happening, you will see the impacted device, you will see the impacted user, you would see that under investigation that this incident has been remediated. However, you also want to review this incident to actually understand what happened, why did it happen, what how did it get into our organization, what were the entities involved. So you can see from here, Notepad was used. Look at it, a scheduled the tax it created was a scheduled Trojan tax. It was remediated, it was deleted. You can see that he was using a notepad to execute this malicious attack. It kind of so for threat hunters and malware analysis people, this will be very 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 beneficial to them, because then they can have an idea of how this malware, how it behaves on the assets, and be able to know how to prevent it from spreading in the organization. So what Microsoft is saying to you, that they've built this robust solution that you can use to detect, remediate, and then even do your intelligence and hunting to be able to gain insight on how much threats are spreading in your environment. So you can now begin to, say, oh, do we have macros enabled do we have macros prevented from running on devices? Do we create attack surface reduction rules that will prevent macros files from running? How was this file able to run? Or, oh yes, because we have it, we remediated it. Because you could have privilege identity in your environment as a user. And so that's why. So when I was simulating this attack, because I have the right to bypass the macros content, I said enabled, and that's why I ran. So by default, it detected that there's a macros file, and then I said enable content. I still wanted to see. So when imagine all those, you go online, you're enticed by a job offer, and then they send you and say fill this form, and then you open this wonderful Word document, and you're thinking that it's just a Word document you open. And when you open the thing, you say is a read only. You have to, it's protected. You have to enable for you to feel. And out of innocence, you click on it. What you have done is you don't know behind it the executable that was running. If we're interested, I can show us how this, how actually this kind of things are triggered, by giving us some simulations. I can do one for us if we're interested. But here we just wanted to see how to see these detections and alerts and how to analyze them as an operations person and then be able to make intelligent decisions from this. So you can see at the point where it has executed, it started unexpected behavior. That process, this notepad was seen to start talking to an external IP. Why? So you can see that it's classified as unexpected behavior observed by a process run with no command line argument. And then again, you can see it run down here. SV, so another process again that was launched and the behavior is suspicious. Any questions, please? All right. Another key, remember everything lands on your incident and alert. That's where you can even see for the email. That's where Microsoft drops all the alerts, as long as the threat signals, the signals are sent from the sensor on your device on your email. It sends it into the incidents and alerts, and then you can take intelligent decisions. So still looking at endpoints, we'll look at vulnerability management. In some organizations, they are bounded by compliance. You must ensure that your devices are that you do vulnerability management every quarter. With the Defender for um, vulnerability service, because these sensors already exist on this endpoint, you don't have to worry yourself about a scan. On a daily basis, it is scanning your devices and matching them across the global vulnerability database and telling you how much vulnerable your systems are. So if you look at the dashboard, you'll be able to see that. So in this organization, this is the exposure level. So remember where I said that for vulnerability assessment, the high score shows that you have high exposure level. The low score shows that. So this is the exposure level, and it has told me that there are vulnerabilities in this, in this these are the top vulnerabilities that you can see. Of course, in this organization is just one device that is up and running, and this device is having this level of impact, Log4j. So as a security operator, you don't even, just by this, you can know whether your organization is vulnerable, devices that are vulnerable, and then you can begin to send reports on vulnerability management compliance out. Any questions, please? Okay, so like I mentioned, today was just an introductory. By tomorrow, we'll be looking at, some additional ways to remediate, looking at some threat hunting queries. We'll be looking at how to, onboard a device, and then how to understand some of this remediation approach. I will also come out with the exact step on how you can create the automatic response and detection. And then we'll look at a case study of a vulnerability that came out in North Korea and how you can use the defender to block the IOCs and block those IPs. We'll take some of the IPs that we saw here and show you how you can block those IPs and the endpoints if they have those, if any devices in the organization further try to communicate to those IPs, they will get a response page that says that this has already been blocked at the endpoint level. All right, that will be all for me for today. And thank you for your
Hello,
time.
hello, Joy.
Hi.
Yeah, what exam does one need to take for the fundamentals on security? What's the first exam to take?
For Microsoft or
Yeah,
for
Microsoft.
in general?
No, Microsoft security.
Okay. So if you want to build a career in security Microsoft, I recommend that you start with, hold on. I recommend that you start with SC 900, right? Now the good thing is, I'll share my screen again and just show you something. Microsoft has created, for starters, Microsoft has a free training and the voucher, so you're lucky.
Hello, I didn't get that. What
Yeah,
did you say? Laugh.
please let me stop recording.
Okay.